Chapter 1. On the Radio.
So, Orla, what you're saying is that wives of men with sleeping disorders should wear boxing gloves to bed. That is not what I said, Marty. Did I get the wrong end of the stick there? What I said was that people with a particular neurological disorder are inclined to act out their dreams aggressively, usually by sleepwalking, and they've been known to hit out at furniture or whatever is nearby, and sometimes this happens to be their sleeping partner. And is anyone looking out for these battered wives? You're twisting things, Marty, probably to make it sound controversial. I simply said they're not conscious of their actions, and it's purely accidental that some men have hit their wives. Marty Maguire had been gazing idly through the glass of his radio studio, throwing glances at the clock, shuffling script notes in his hands, and speaking thoughtlessly. Orla O'Brien was probably right to get annoyed. He was bored, and he thought this dream business was bunkum. Marty became aware that his PA, Breda, was staring sourly at him. Her mouth was drawn as thinly as the edge of a knife. The overhead lights bounced off her spectacles, hiding her eyes and making her look even more android-like than usual. Marty slowly slid his hand through his hair, which he knew needed cutting and which he imagined he saw reflected in Breda's glasses. Not long and shiny and cool as it appeared in his bathroom mirror, but scraggly, untidy and shapeless. Swallowing a sigh, he turned to his guest and placed a winning smile on his face. Marty owed thanks to a former girlfriend for showing him how to keep smiling whether he wanted to or not. "Place your tongue on the roof of your mouth," she'd said. "It props up the smile and shows your teeth. You can hold it for hours, effortlessly." "Sorry about that, Orla," he said. "Just taking a slant I know our listeners will pick up on." Marty let the smile drop and focused on his mic. "Dreams and dreaming. That's the hot topic on the show this morning, folks. Orla O'Brien from UCD is live with us here in the Radio 2 FM studio. She's been saying research shows that stroke victims sometimes lose the ability to dream and get depressed as a result." Poor sods. Wouldn't you think having a stroke was depressing enough on its own? We've heard about dream recall. Orla was telling us that if you wake a dreamer, they can give lucid details of their dream, but if allowed to sleep on, most have no memory of dreaming the following day. These were laboratory tests, folks, and maybe it's different in the real world. So pick up the phone and tell us what you think. Marty swung his pen through the air as though he was conducting. In the studio control room, the sound technician, Rory, acknowledged the cue and slid up the volume of the next track on Marty's playlist. He turned to Breda, shaking his head. "He's getting too big for his boots, you know. That's the second guest he's rubbish this week. People won't come on the show if he keeps that up. And where will the great Marty Maguire be then?" Breda didn't like to be disloyal to her boss, but she had to agree that Rory had a point. She put the blame for the disintegration of Marty's manners squarely on the shoulders of a certain young madam from radio admin. Under cover of the music, Marty had planned to usher Orla from the studio. He gave an inward groan as he thought of this aspect of his job. There were other, more interesting, more... He tore himself away from his thoughts and swung the chair around. He hadn't seen Orla O'Brien rise to her feet as the first bars of Daydream Believer reached her ears. He didn't hear the sharp brush of her hand removing dust from her skirt. By the time he turned, that firm hand was gripping the studio doorknob, and he noticed the veins in her wrist swell as she pulled the door towards her. "Call on somebody else next time, Mr. Maguire," she said, and left before he had time to offer her a tour of the radio station and a cup of dreadful canteen coffee. Huh, grumbled Marty as the door closed. Her loss. Rita came through, holding a sheet of paper in her hand. I've chosen 2 callers for you to speak to. They have completely different backgrounds. One is from the country and one is from Dublin. Be nice to them. You weren't very pleasant to Orla O'Brien, Marty. Don't forget the ratings. Don't ever forget the ratings. The sound of the song faded and Marty once again faced the microphone. If you've just tuned in, folks, you've missed discussion on an unusual topic this morning. We've had an expert, Orla O'Brien from UCD, talking to us about dreams and dreaming. But now it's time to hear our listeners' experiences. And to kick off, I have Mrs. Nolan of Nina on the line. Good morning, Mrs. Nolan. Good morning, Mr. Maguire. It's a fine morning here in Nina too, though we had a bit of frost earlier. Call me Marty. I gather you have a very practical view on dreaming, Mrs. Nolan. Would you like to tell us about it? I've no time for it, Mr. Maguire. I'm far too busy getting organised and prepared for the important things in life. If I have a dream at all, it'll be about setting the table for my husband's breakfast, or the recipe I'm taking to the WI, or something useful of the sort. Sounds very practical indeed, Mrs. Nolan, and a long way from the strange things we've been hearing this morning, one of which was about attempts to manipulate dreams. Do you think it's possible to control your dreams? Well now, Mr. Maguire, the parish priest, Father Roach, was saying only the other week in his sermon that dreaming was frivolous and sinful and probably the biggest cause of the credit crunch, with people wanting things that are beyond their reach. And I agree with him. Young people today are far too frivolous, and dreaming is probably at the bottom of much of the trouble. Father Roach might have been referring to a different kind of dreaming there, Mrs. Nolan, but it would be good to hear another view. I've got a caller on line too. Aisling from Dublin 4. Go ahead. What's your experience of dreaming?
It's such an important part of my life, Marty. I believe in the power of dreaming utterly. Only the other night, Marty, didn't I dream I was shopping in Dundrum, and it was a bit of a nightmare, I have to tell you. The shop was full of people dressed in pyjamas. Awfully common they were. The pyjamas, I mean, with hideous patterns on them. These people were wandering around the shops with no consciousness of how inappropriately they were dressed. It was spoiling my experience until I spotted the hairband.
A hairband, Aisling?
Yes, Marty, a hairband. Not just an ordinary hairband, but a purple velvet one. The very thing I needed to finish off my outfit for Leopardstown. I bought it, of course.
I'm a bit lost here, Aisling. Tell us how this illustrates the importance of dreaming.
I went straight to Dundrum the very next day, Marty, and I found the exact hairband. I often dream of the future.
Really, Aisling, that's amazing. And have you anything to say about Aisling's experience of dreaming, Mrs. Nolan? Well, it's little you have to do, Miss Aisling of Dublin 4, with your dreaming of shopping and hairbands and pyjamas. A useless sort of nightlife, I'd call that. If I have any spare time in my dreams, I spend it in the church arranging flowers.
And what I would say to you, Mrs. Nolan of Nina, is that you have no life of your own at all, not even in your dreams, and you should consider taking a night off from doing chores and go shopping instead. You might find yourself waking refreshed in the morning.
I have no problem waking and feeling refreshed, Miss Aisling of Dublin 4. I'm up at 6 every morning getting my husband's breakfast, and I'm at Mass by 8 o'clock, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear you're still in your bed at that hour, probably in pyjamas and wearing a hairband. Now, ladies, let's not get heated here. A caller has just texted to say that the dreams you're both experiencing are very ordinary and not weird in the way that many others experience. Would you care to respond to that, ladies? I've no time for that sort of thing, Mr. Maguire. No time for it.
The pyjama people in my dream were very weird, Marty. I wouldn't want to meet them during the day, especially at the shops.
We leave it there now, ladies, and take a short musical break. Marty looked through the glass just as a young woman walked into the studio. His mouth seemed to melt as he gazed at her, and he forgot to cue Rory on the next song. End of chapter 1.